All right, welcome back for another deep dive. Today, we're going to tackle something I think everyone listening can relate to: mastering a skill. We've got some great material to dig into from performance coach Wayne Goldsmith. He's laid out this whole 7 Steps to Perfection model. And when I first saw that title, I gotta admit, I was a little skeptical. Perfection. I mean, isn't that setting the bar kind of high?
Yeah, I mean, we both work with people on performance, and it's always about continuous improvement, right? Not some magical end state. So I was definitely curious to see what Goldsmith was actually proposing here.
Exactly. Especially because you sent over those notes and, you were expressing some skepticism about this whole model, which honestly I share. But that's what makes these deep dives so fun, right? Let's break down these 7 steps and see if Goldsmith can really back up this bold claim of quote unquote perfection.
Okay, so step 1 is perform the skill. I mean, on the surface, it seems almost too simple, right?
Right. Duh. But Goldsmith actually uses this seemingly obvious step to point out a pitfall I think a lot of people fall into. He says people get stuck at this very first stage because they're just mimicking, they're not really understanding the mechanics of what they're doing.
Yeah, it's like watching someone try to learn a dance move from a video. They might be hitting the steps, but there's no flow, no real understanding of the technique.
Such a good example. I think that's where Goldsmith's background as a performance coach really shines through. He's not just interested in rote repetition. He's emphasizing mindful practice,
Absolutely. And that leads perfectly into step 2, perform the skill very well. This is where Goldsmith emphasizes the need for honest feedback, critical analysis, that kind of thing. It's not enough to just go through the motions. You really need to be able to assess your performance, identify those areas for improvement, and refine your technique.
So you're saying we got to ditch the rose-colored glasses and get real with ourselves about where we're falling short.
Yeah.
I can see how that could rub some people the wrong way.
Oh, absolutely. Nobody likes to hear they're not as good as they think they are. But Goldsmith would argue that this honest self-assessment is crucial for moving beyond that basic competence towards true mastery.
Right. It's like that classic American Idol contestant who thinks they're amazing, but can't hold a tune to save their life. They're performing, but they're not performing well.
Exactly. Or think about public speaking. You could rehearse a speech 100 times in front of the mirror, but without feedback from someone else, you might miss those subtle nuances in your delivery that make all the difference.
Okay, so we've got to perform the skill, and we've got to perform it well. Seems reasonable enough, but then Goldsmith throws us a curveball with step 3. Perform the skill very well, and at speed.
And I can already hear our audience thinking, wait a minute, isn't slowing down and focusing on precision the key to mastering a skill?
Right. It's that whole slow and steady wins the race thing. But Goldsmith actually argues that, no, slow motion perfection isn't enough in the real world.
He makes this really interesting point that in most situations, speed is a critical component of skillful execution. Think about a surgeon operating on a patient or a musician playing a complex piece. They need to be precise and fast.
Okay, I'm starting to see how this applies beyond just athletic performance. I mean, we've all had those moments where we have to think on our feet, make decisions quickly and execute flawlessly, even when we're under pressure.
And that's exactly what Goldsmith is getting at. He's challenging us to think about speed not as an afterthought, but as an integral part of skill mastery. Remember what you were saying about prepping for that big meeting?
Oh yeah, I'm definitely going to need to be quick on my feet during the Q&A.
Exactly. Goldsmith would argue that your ability to think and respond quickly is just as important as the content of your presentation itself.
Okay, so he's got me thinking differently about speed. But this is where things start to get really interesting. Step 4 takes this idea of speed and adds another layer of complexity. Perform the skill very well, at speed, and under fatigue.
And I've got to admit, when I first read this, I thought, okay, now he's being unrealistic. Nobody can perform at their peak when they're exhausted.
Right. We're human, not robots. But then I remembered Goldsmith's background in sports. He spent years observing athletes pushing their limits, and he knows firsthand that fatigue is a factor in almost every competitive situation.
He gives this great example of the last 20 meters of a 100-meter freestyle swim. Your muscles are screaming, your lungs are burning, but you have to maintain perfect technique if you want to win.
It's like that feeling when you're running a marathon and you hit the wall, but you still have miles to go.
And Goldsmith's point is that training for those moments, pushing yourself beyond your comfort zone, That's what separates the good from the great. He even talks about these danger zones in competition, those moments where exhaustion sets in, and even the simplest tasks feel impossible.
Okay, so maybe he's onto something here. But he doesn't stop there, does he?
Nope. Step 5 throws in yet another challenge. Perform the skill very well, at speed, under fatigue, and under pressure.
All right, now he's piling it on. But honestly, this is where it starts to feel really relevant to, well, anyone, not just athletes. We all face pressure situations, whether it's giving a presentation, negotiating a deal, or even trying to parallel park on a busy street.
Exactly. And Goldsmith's point is that pressure can have a huge impact on our ability to perform, even when we've mastered a skill in more relaxed settings. He uses a really great term for this: psychophysiology.
Ooh, I like that. So it's not just about physical mastery, it's about mental resilience as well.
Yeah.
He's basically saying if we want to be truly good at something, we need to be able to handle the heat when the stakes are high.
Precisely. And this is where coaching becomes so crucial. Goldsmith argues that training should incorporate elements of pressure to prepare athletes, or anyone really, for the real deal.
So are you saying that to master a skill, we should be intentionally putting ourselves in uncomfortable situations?
In a controlled environment, yes. Remember, practice makes perfect. But it has to be the right kind of practice. And that means pushing ourselves beyond our comfort zones and getting used to performing under pressure.
This is all starting to make a lot of sense. So we've covered the first 5 steps. Perform. Perfect. Speed. Fatigue. Pressure. What's next?
Well, step 6 brings in a crucial element: consistency. It's not enough to nail a skill once in a while. You've got to be able to do it reliably every time. Here's how Goldsmith puts it, and get ready for this. Perform the skill very well, at speed, under fatigue, and under pressure, consistently.
So it's not about having a lucky streak. It's about building a foundation of consistent excellence. That makes sense, but how do we actually get there? Is it just about more practice?
It's about the quality of that practice.
Oh.
Goldsmith argues that athletes, and really people in general, often have 2 brains: a training brain that accepts mediocrity and a competition brain that demands excellence.
Oh, I know exactly what he means. It's so easy to slack off when the stakes aren't high. But that's not going to help you when it really matters.
Exactly. The secret, according to Goldsmith, is to use your competition brain in every training session.
Okay, I'm getting fired up now. Bring on step 7.
This is the culmination of everything we've talked about. Perform the skill very well at speed, under fatigue, and under pressure. Consistently in competition conditions.
Wow. Say that 5 times fast.
Yeah.
But seriously, this step really brings everything together, doesn't it? It's like he's saying, okay, you've mastered the individual elements. Now let's see if you can perform when it truly counts.
Exactly. And I think this is where a lot of people, even those who are highly skilled, stumble. They can practice and rehearse all they want, but when they step into that high-pressure environment, everything changes.
Like the classic example of stage fright. A musician can play flawlessly in their practice room, but put them on a stage with the lights and the audience, and suddenly their fingers turn to lead.
Precisely. And Goldsmith argues that this isn't just about nerves or anxiety, it's about a fundamental difference between practicing in isolation and performing under the scrutiny of others. He even uses this really vivid analogy of juggling sticks of dynamite to illustrate the point.
Juggling dynamite. Okay, now I have to hear this.
He says that, performing a basic skill well isn't that difficult, but add in the fatigue, the pressure, the expectations of everyone watching, and suddenly that basic skill becomes incredibly challenging and, potentially explosive.
That's a brilliant analogy. It really highlights how all those factors we've been talking about, the fatigue, the pressure, the mental game, they all come together in competition to create this whole different beast. It's like the difference between playing chess against a computer and playing against a grandmaster in a tournament.
Exactly. And I think this is where Goldsmith's model really pushes past conventional thinking about skill mastery. He's not just saying practice, practice, practice. He's saying practice under conditions that mirror the real world with all its complexities and unpredictability.
So if I'm understanding this correctly, step 7 is about more than just replicating competition conditions in practice. It's about developing a mindset, a resilience that allows you to thrive in those high-stakes moments.
You're exactly right. And that brings us back to that initial question we both had about perfection. What does it actually mean?
Right. Because if perfection is only achievable in a perfectly controlled environment, then is it really achievable at all? And honestly, isn't striving for some unattainable ideal kind of setting ourselves up for disappointment?
I think that's a valid concern, but I don't think Goldsmith is suggesting that perfection is about, flawlessly executing a skill every single time, no matter what. I think he's using the term more as a guiding principle, an aspiration.
So it's not about achieving some kind of robotic, error-free performance. It's about consistently striving for excellence, even when the conditions are far from perfect.
Exactly. It's about pushing your limits, embracing the challenges, and knowing that even in the face of setbacks, you're still growing and improving. It's about that competition brain always looking for ways to, refine and elevate your performance.
This is making me think about those athletes who seem to perform even better under pressure. They almost seem to, feed off of it, like they have some kind of superpower.
That's a great observation, and it goes back to what we were saying earlier about the mental game. Some people do seem to have a natural predisposition for thriving in those high-pressure situations, but it's also a skill that can be developed through practice and mindset training.
I'm starting to see how all these pieces fit together. It's not just about physical skill or technical proficiency. It's about mental toughness, emotional intelligence, and the ability to perform consistently under pressure. It's a holistic approach to mastery.
Exactly, and I think that's what makes Goldsmith's model so compelling. It's not just about achieving some arbitrary standard of perfection. It's about understanding the complexities of human performance and developing a framework for continuous growth and improvement.
It's like he's taken this idea of practice makes perfect and broken it down into its component parts, revealing all the nuances and complexities that go into mastering any skill, whether it's playing a sport, giving a presentation, or even just navigating the complexities of everyday life.
And in doing so, he's given us a roadmap, a set of tools that we can use to achieve our own personal and professional goals.
As we're talking, I'm realizing that this model doesn't just apply to big, audacious goals. It can be used to improve any aspect of our lives, even something as simple as learning to cook a new dish.
Absolutely. It's about setting a goal, breaking it down into manageable steps, and then consistently working towards that goal, even when it gets tough. And maybe that's the true meaning of perfection, the dedication and resilience we bring to the pursuit of our goals.
So you came into this deep dive ready to be a skeptic, right? To poke holes in Goldsmith's theory. Have you changed your mind?
I have to admit, I'm impressed. Initially, I was skeptical of the whole perfection thing, but Goldsmith has reframed that concept in a way that makes sense. It's not about some unattainable ideal. It's about striving for excellence in every aspect of our lives.
That's a great way to put it. So we've covered all 7 steps. We've dissected the concept of perfection. We've explored the mental and physical aspects of skill mastery. What are your final thoughts on all this?
I think Goldsmith's 7 Steps to Perfection offers a really powerful framework for anyone who wants to achieve mastery in any field. It's a reminder that talent alone isn't enough. It takes hard work, dedication, and a willingness to embrace the challenges along the way.
And maybe, just maybe, that's what perfection is all about. The journey, the struggle, the constant pursuit of something greater than ourselves. But I do still have one lingering question.
What's that?
Well, we've talked a lot about practice, about pushing ourselves, about embracing challenges. But what about the role of natural talent? Does Goldsmith really believe that anyone can achieve mastery regardless of their innate abilities?
That's a great question, and it's one that we'll explore in the final part of our deep dive into Wayne Goldsmith's 7 Steps to Perfection. Stay tuned.